Welcome back to the Gita in Action podcast, where we take the ancient wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita and we bring it in to the mess and the magic of modern life. I'm Radha Priti, and in today's episode, we're going to dive into chapter 5. So we just finished chapter 1 through 4. We're starting chapter 5 today, and we'll talk about the first few verses in chapter 5. And in these verses, Krishna is going to tackle one of Arjuna's deepest doubts. And it's this doubt of whether he should renounce everything and walk away or stay in the world and act with devotion. And this question has come up a couple times. It came up in chapter 3, the same question. But in chapter 5, Krishna is going to answer it even deeper. So it's like the blossoming of a lotus flower, just the answers get deeper and deeper as we get drawn in. So we'll talk about what real renunciation looks like, how karma yoga actually frees us, and why acting with knowledge can be more powerful than withdrawing from life. So we'll start with text 1, but just first to say a couple things about chapter 5 as we start it here. Chapter 5 is called Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness. And this means that by knowledge, one can understand how to work while being renounced. This has been a theme that we've been talking about for a couple chapters now. And so it's going to be elaborated here in chapter 5. So it's not about renunciation. We talked a lot at the beginning of chapter 3. We talked about the different levels of renunciation, mature renunciation, premature renunciation, right? Just walking away from our duties before we're really ready, before we're really realized. We talked about detached action, which is what we're talking about here with karma yoga. And we talked about attached action. So acting when you're very attached to the results of your action. We talked about these different categories, and we're going to continue this theme here and we're going to learn more about real renunciation. So that mature renunciation, we're going to learn more about it, what it is, and we're going to learn more about karma yoga also. And we're going to kind of learn these two paths and then also what Krishna recommends and why. So in the second chapter, if you remember, we talked a lot about the soul and the body, and we talked about how to get out of this material body. And then in the third chapter, Krishna talked about how a person that's situated on a platform of knowledge no longer has duties to perform. So when you have that knowledge, you no longer have this obligation to perform duties. So you're kind of immune from that system, right? We talked about that, how you're kind of taken out of this karmic material system and you're on the transcendental plane. And therefore you don't have any duties, right? If you have that level of knowledge, if you know fully your constitutional position and you're fully self-realized, then you're free from duty. We talked about that in chapter 3. And then in chapter 4, we talked about, Krishna told Arjuna about all these different kinds of sacrificial work that culminate in knowledge, so that we can get knowledge from by doing all of this sacrificial work. So Krishna in the 5th chapter, he's going to talk about the principle of renunciation in action. So we're doing our duty, but we're renounced internally. And a major theme of the Gita in itself is that action can lead to disentanglement. But if it's done with intelligence, it can lead to liberation. And this will be discussed in the 5th chapter. So the 4th chapter concluded with Krishna telling Arjuna to arise and fight. Remember that metaphor with the sword of knowledge cuts through the doubts, rise and fight. The 5th chapter begins again with Arjuna having a doubt. I say again because he had the same doubt in chapter 3, but we're going to unpack it a little bit more in chapter 5. So with that kind of intro, let's go ahead and start the reading. We'll get right into chapter 1 or text 1. Text 1 says, Arjuna said, "O Krishna, first of all, you ask me to renounce work, and then again you recommend work with devotion. Now will you kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial?" So again, in the end of the 4th chapter, Krishna talked about peace and renunciation of work. So this makes Arjuna doubt whether Krishna wants him to fight. So he's having the same kind of, he's starting to kind of grasp what's going on here, but he's still having doubts about the difference between renunciation and work. And he's again thinking that it's just black and white. You either renounce, you either walk away, or you work. And Krishna's trying to bring him to this realization that you can work while being renounced. And so he's continuing to kind of unpack this path for him. So because in the end of chapter 4, Krishna talked about peace and renunciation of work, Arjuna is again confused. He's like, okay, you're telling me to fight, but you're talking about peace and renunciation of work. What am I supposed to do here? So again, he doesn't understand how work and renunciation can be compatible. Like he can do them at the same time. He's not quite grasping that yet. So again, this question is similar to the question in the 3rd chapter, but he's going to unpack it more. So these first 6 texts in this chapter, in chapter 5, we're going to talk about how karma yoga, the yoga of detached work, is equal to, but easier than what we call jnana yoga. Jnana yoga is yoga of knowledge, and this is when we talk about renunciation. We're talking about jnana yoga. So both what Krishna is going to tell us in these first 6 verses is that both will have the same result, but karma yoga is easier. So when we talk about jnana yoga, we talk about this is, again, think of real renunciation, think of mature renunciation. When we say jnana yoga, we talk about mature renunciation. And this, again, it's not running away. We talked a lot about premature renunciation, where we're just like tired of our duties, or we're conflicted, and so we just stop. We just run away from, the world. That's not it. Okay, real renunciation, this jnana yoga, it comes from real knowledge. It's a person who's practicing jnana yoga. They're at the highest level of material consciousness. Their consciousness is very high, and they're contemplating on the world, and they have these really deep realizations that this external world, this material existence, isn't real. And what's real is the soul, is the spiritual existence. And so through that, they can detach. But it's through this knowledge, and it happens at a very high level of material consciousness. So I was thinking about, I was trying to think of an analogy to demonstrate the difference between this jnana yoga and karma yoga. Because a jnana yoga, again, it's meditating on all of these, it's studying, it's kind of breaking apart the material world, studying it analytically, and figuring out that it's temporary, that it's not real. And then in that, you realize the soul, you realize what is real. Okay. And karma yoga is doing your duty in this world, so acting in this material world in a mood of selfless detachment. In a mood of selfless detachment. And in that way, you're connecting to spirituality. You're connecting to the spiritual plane. You're connecting to God. Okay, so when I was thinking about the difference, because we're going to talk about this jnana yoga and karma yoga a lot, and I wanted to kind of come up with an analogy to demonstrate the difference. So I was thinking jnana yoga, it's like taking a cookie cutter and pressing out the perfect shapes that you want for your cookies. Right? Like you're focused on removing the excess, cutting away everything that's not the cookie. So it's clean, it's precise, it's a little detached. You're separating what doesn't belong, so only the real thing remains. Okay? So that's what a jnana yoga is doing. They're kind of detaching from this material existence. Karma yoga, on the other hand, it's like working with the whole sheet of dough. Like you don't throw it away. You knead it, you shape it, you bake it. You're fully engaging with what's in front of you, but with love and intention. Okay, and you're not doing it for your own enjoyment. You're making the cookies as an offering for someone else. That's the spirit of devotion. So whether you cut away what's not the cookie or you shape the whole dough into something beautiful, the end result is the same. You still get a cookie. Okay, so the path is different, but the goal is the same. The goal is being purification and self-realization. So then when you're deciding what path to take, it's really kind of like what's best suited to your nature. And some of these things, I want to kind of reiterate that the Gita, we're not going to be able to relate to all of these things in our Western mindset, our Western conception. But I want to kind of try to make some of these things a little bit more easier to understand and accessible so that when we read the Gita, we can understand what they're talking about a little bit. Because the reality is that most of us in this Western world I mean, the path of Jnana Yoga is a very advanced path. I mean, it's a very high level of material consciousness to be able to have those kinds of realizations, that we're not going to be able to relate to that much. But it can be important for us to understand what real renunciation is. And so in that way, when we think that we're being renounced, we know that we're really not, right? We know that it's more like premature renunciation. So when we can understand this really high level of renunciation, then sometimes when maybe we think that we're being renounced, we can understand the difference between premature renunciation and real renunciation. So the point of these first six texts is Krishna saying that real renunciation and karma yoga are different paths, but they lead to the same goal. And that's what's going to be unpacked here in the preceding verses. Does anybody want to share anything before we move on to chapter 2? Did that make sense about real renunciation, mature
Can you
renunciation,
repeat?
how it's called yan? Yeah,
Can you repeat one more time about Gyan Yoga?
yan yoga. About what it is.
Yeah, like Karma Yoga was the selfless detachment and connecting to God. What was the Gyan Yoga? It was the higher realization.
Yeah, so Jnana Yoga is renouncing from the world. It's an analytical study of the world such that you come to realize that everything material is not real. And so, but you're not acting in the world. That's kind of the point. You're not acting in the world, you're renouncing from the world. So that's why in the
Okay.
cookie cutter analogy, it's like you're cutting out the perfect cookie and you're removing all the excess. That's what they're doing. You're kind of getting rid of, you're not focused on the material world. You're detaching from it. You're pulling away from it. You're renouncing from it. And you're only focusing on what's real, on that soul. So then in karma yoga, you're using all of that dough, all of that cookie dough, all the material existence. You're kneading it, you're
And
shaping it,
then,
you're baking it. You're fully engaged, but you're doing it in a selfless mood, in a mood of love and detachment, in a mood of love and intention.
yeah.
And that's the difference that in karma yoga, we're using what we have. We're moving around this world. It may look like we're engaged in this world, but because we're doing it in a spirit of devotion, it's selfless, it's detached.
Yeah.
So in that way, that's how we're establishing our connection with God,
Mhm.
is by serving in that way. Where in Jnana Yoga, they're completely detaching from this material existence. They're not involved, they're not engaged. And that's
Would that,
achieved through that realization that it's not real.
Mhm.
would that be kind of
Sadhus.
like yogis or even maybe possibly Mayavadis who are
Yeah.
just meditating in the hills for, years?
Going.
Yeah, exactly. And this isn't something we don't really see. I mean, this jnana yoga, it's not something that we can really, our Western mind can really relate to.
Yeah.
But these people do exist, like in India, in like Mariah's saying, that just kind of walk away from the world
The
and
monks.
and yeah, and only focus on what's real. And these are the two options that Arjuna's seen. Remember when he wants to run away and he doesn't want to fight? You know, that's he's thinking that that would be yan yoga, which it wouldn't actually because his consciousness isn't quite there. He has a lot of passion. He's a satriya, so he's not even it would be more like premature renunciation. But even if his consciousness was there, this is when Krishna tells him, fight anyway to set an example. Do your duty anyway to set an example.
Mm.
But so now I'm just trying to explain the highest standard, which is this yan yoga. And it's a path, it's a yoga path to connect with divinity. And there's lots of yoga paths to connect with divinity. But we're going to learn about why Krishna recommends that we and Arjuna practice this karma yoga. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's move on to the second verse. Trevor, do you want to share something?
Yeah, I was gonna just simplify what you said. Everything you said was pretty cool. I never heard it explained like that. That's pretty awesome. Uh, the in simplicity, basically, jnani yoga, jnani, like you said, means knowledge, It's like one of the stepping stones to bhakti. Basically, like you're trying to just figure out what is actually going on, and you're trying to see reality as it is. So it's more like approaching God with your mind, and you're becoming inquisitive in jnana yoga. So like you're almost there, but you're not quite there yet. Basically, bhakti is more heart oriented. Karma yoga is more like on the surface level. Jnana yoga is like where a lot of the impersonalists kind of get stuck and camping out and halfway up the mountain. Jnana yoga is like yoga for the mind, yoga uh, with your head, basically.
Yeah, it's more analytical. Yeah, more analytical. Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's go to the second text. And all throughout today, we're going to kind of reiterate these concepts, and we have several different analogies to do it. So by the end, you should have a nice, clear understanding of these paths and their differences and their similarities. But again, for us, the yan isn't as easy to relate to, but when we understand the super high level of renunciation, we could better understand when we think that we're renouncing, but we're not really, because we have to understand what renunciation really is. And it's not just walking away from your duties because they're too hard. So the second text says, the personality of Godhead replied, the renunciation of work and work in devotion are both good for liberation, but of the two, work in devotional service is better than renunciation of work. Okay, so he's continuing on this theme. He says that both mature renunciation, which is this path of jnana yoga that we just talked about, and karma yoga, working in the mood of detachment, he says both will lead to long-term benefit. But among the two, karma yoga is better. And it's better because it's easier. Okay, it's more practical for people that are living in the world, like Arjuna's situation. It's not so practical for us to not engage in material energy. I mean, it's just not practical for us to go and often live in a forest and meditate. This karma yoga, it leads to purification through action. So that's the key difference. It leads to purification through action, not by avoidance. That's renunciation. That's this jnana yoga. It involves engagement of all of our faculties, our mind, our body, our intellect. They're all engaged in God's service. And this leads to a faster transformation. So that's why this path is the recommended path for us. And a theme of the Gita is to teach us how to not become bound in material existence, because attachment causes bondage. To the extent that one is detached, one isn't bound, one isn't pulled by this material existence, right? To the extent that one is detached. Both renunciation and karma yoga prevent attachment. So that's good. But of the two, karma yoga is better because it's easier. It's easier to attach to something higher than it is to detach kind of independently of where we are. It's like if we have two options, we're gonna choose the path that's higher, and that automatically is gonna make us not do the lower energy thing. You know, it's like when you have a child and you could go out and party on a Saturday night, but instead you stay home and take care of the child. It's because you have a higher option, because you have something higher to connect with. To just like cold turkey be really into partying and say, okay, I'm not going to do it anymore. It's a little bit harder. So that's kind of a material example of this concept. But it's the same in karma yoga or bhakti yoga. We're attaching to something higher. And so therefore, things that are lower, that don't serve us as much, like some of our material attachments, naturally kind of go away. But in this jnana yoga and renunciation, you're not necessarily attaching to something higher. You're just detaching from this material, from your material attachments, because you come to understand that they're not real, and what's real is the soul. So that's kind of the difference here. So he's saying it's easier, the path of karma yoga, the path of attaching to something higher is easier. And we understand that staying free from bondage, it's fundamentally important. Okay, it's very important to stay free from bondage in our spiritual life. That's like a crucial part of spiritual life. Bondage means the repeated cycle of birth and death. We talked about this a lot in chapter 2. Our present body is a result of what we've chased after for enjoyment in the past. Because when our body dies, the soul finds a new body. And the soul chooses that body based off of kind of its desires and its karma that it's acquired. And that's the repetition of birth and death. That's what we talk about when we want to get out of this repetition of birth and death. It's that cycle that's happening. And it's happening because we have desires that aren't related to God. These desires are, I want to be an independent enjoyer. I want to enjoy the things in this material world. And therefore, through this system that God created, we get these opportunities over and over and over again to enjoy as much as we want until we figure out all these things actually aren't fulfilling the highest calling of my heart, and God is. And when we start to have that realization, we start to follow one of these paths, we can get out of this cycle of birth and death. And that's what bondage is. We're bound to this cycle of birth and death. So to get out of this, we need to inquire about our real identity, the soul. If we don't know our real identity, we'll just keep working for the enjoyment of our body, our mind, our senses, because that's what's right in front of us. If we don't know something higher, we'll just keep working for what's in front of us. So we have to develop this love for God. That's how we get out of it. And that's how we get out of the bondage of material existence. Okay, so we've established that detachment and getting out of bondage is important. So now let's talk about our situation, the illusion that we fall under. And this is a point that we repeat again and again and again in these classes because it's so important. And oftentimes, as soon as we hear this, we'll walk away and we'll forget. We'll forget, and we know we're forgetting because we're not living from the place of knowing that our soul is our eternal identity, is what's real. Knowing that our soul is our eternal identity and that our body is this vehicle for our soul. That's what's real. Okay, the soul and the body, they're separate. But we think that they're the same. Because of this enjoy mentality that we have, it welds the soul to the body. And the soul is actually different. But it's become welded and mended to this body because of the desire to enjoy. Because we act to gratify the senses. This binds the soul to the body. So just knowing that we're not the material body and that we're the soul is not enough. We have to act as if we know. We have to act as if we know. It's not just knowing. It's not just this theoretical knowledge. We have to act like we know. And when we can act like we know, then it reinforces this knowledge. So an example of acting like we know that our true identity is our soul and not our body, and that gratifying the senses is not what gives us the utmost happiness and fulfillment in this life. An example of acting like we know. Okay, so say you're like a famous speaker and your main motivation is for your ego or to get credit or to get more famous or get more money. Okay, any of those kinds of things that serve the ego. Versus you're a famous speaker and you want to help people as a service to God. And you don't even care about the credit or the rewards, right? Those are two different examples. Okay, one person is acting like they don't know, the first person. They're acting like whatever satisfies the body, the mind, the senses is what gives them happiness, okay? Because that's what they're after. They're after credit. They're after getting more famous. They're after money, all these material things, because they're thinking that their body and their soul are the same. Okay, but a person who knows that their soul is their real identity and that therefore we have to act in line with the soul to obtain the greatest happiness and fulfillment in this world, that person knows that any service they do is for God. And that these little temporary things in the material world, these outcomes, these results that are materialistic, they know that that's not really giving them that much happiness or connection in this world, and therefore they're not really after it. Because to the degree that we care about the credit, we're situated in our ego and we're going to suffer. Because we'll experience a high from getting a lot of attention. And then when we lose that high, say maybe, we don't get a lot of attention or somebody doesn't like what we do or say, we get depressed, right? We get anxious or depressed because we become dependent on this external validation, this material validation to feel good about ourselves, right? And we come to think that we're the center, and we need all of that. Because we're the center, we're the most important. Everybody should serve us, and therefore everybody should think that we're great, give us lots of credit, give us lots of money, right? But that's not our rightful position. And because that's not our rightful position, that's not going to be a permanent position. We may experience some attention, some fame, some money for a short amount of time, but that's going to go away. And when that goes away, if we've become attached to it, we've identified with it, we're going to become very depressed and very anxious. It's going to be really hard for us. And that's because that's not how we're designed. We're not designed to be the center. We're designed to serve the center. That's our rightful position. And if we fall under the illusion that we're the center and that what makes me happy in this world is satisfying my mind, my body, my senses, we're going to suffer. Okay? But if we know that at our essence, we're a part and parcel of God, and whatever we do is to serve God, then we don't expect any credit. We don't expect any credit. We're not even interested in credit. We're just doing what we do to serve God, because that's where we experience the ultimate bliss and connection. And our happiness isn't dependent on those external things. We're just relishing in this connection with God. That's where we want to get. That's our rightful position. And most of us are maybe somewhere in between here, right? We have some motivation to serve God, but we also, maybe we want a little bit of credit, right? That's natural. That's our human tendency. And that's okay. But we should just understand that to the degree that we require recognition for our ego, we're going to suffer. Because that's what happens when we try to act in a position that isn't ours. And that doesn't mean that we just turn off our basic human needs, right? We have these needs. Like, it's important that if, you feel supported and loved, and these are basic human needs. But we have to recognize when these needs become insatiable and we're on a roller coaster of ups and downs, depending on the result. We should understand when that happens, that it's like a flashing red light that we need to take more shelter of God. We need to take more shelter of this knowledge. We need to strengthen that connection, because that's our ultimate connection. And in this way, we can become more cognizant of more than just me, myself, and I, because that's the illusion that we're under, that we're the center, and that what makes us happy is gratifying the senses and the mind and the ego. We need to understand that we're all a part of God, and that this understanding, this can cure us. So to the degree that we don't get credit for something that we feel like we should deserve the credit for, we should accept that as God's mercy for not feeding our ego. Because if that's a vulnerability, right? If our ego fills up with all of this pride, we may think in the moment that that's what's going to lead to happiness, but it doesn't. It just doesn't, because we're in this temporary material existence. And as soon as we get some ups, we're going to fall back down. And that's the nature. So we need to get out of that whole cycle. And we get out of that whole cycle of these ups and downs, this duality, by connecting to God. Because to the degree that we hold on to our ego, we suffer. It's a burden that we think is a treasure, the ego. So you may say, what about the need to be seen and heard and valued in a relationship? Like, these things are important, right? We can't just suppress our needs and say, okay, well, that's ego, so I'm just not going to act there. I'm just not going to go there. We can't suppress these needs, but we can regulate them. We can regulate these needs. And this is why we have things like families and spouses and close friends, right? We try to regulate these needs in a loving way, just like we try to regulate everything in material existence, right? We try to regulate that, and then we try to center it around God, because we know that that's where we experience the ultimate happiness and fulfillment. So in a healthy relationship, you can express your needs with the other person, and the people work together to fulfill them. And eventually, through this system of like mutual love and support, we may find that the things that we thought we needed I need this much time to do this, and I need things just this way. We may find that as a sacrifice to the other person, we actually don't need those things. Right? We may find that we're able to sacrifice our needs for someone else. And this is a way that we can actually start to understand love and experience God's love. And when we start to love God, that's the highest, right? He's the greatest reservoir of love. Think how that can transform our hearts. So if our hearts are transformed in a relationship with your spouse or your child, because you're able to sacrifice some of your needs maybe for that other person, that love is uplifting you. That love is transforming you. So imagine if we could start to develop love for God, the transformation that can happen in our hearts, because God is the reservoir of love. How that can make us selfless. So this process is not by forcing or suppressing our needs. Okay, it's about regulating our needs, and then it's about accepting and practicing the process to develop love for God. Having faith in this process, and then waiting for the grace, waiting for the mercy. And this is the process, and we've talked about this process several times. So we have to be where we are. We have to accept where we are. We have to be where we are. And in that, we have to regulate these material desires and these material attachments while we're attaching to God in this way. We're developing that higher love, that higher connection that's really going to be our strong foundation and our shelter. So if we just renounce activities without having any of this knowledge, our hearts don't become purified. And if our hearts don't become purified, then we'll just continue doing things for our own enjoyment. But if we work with the knowledge of who we are, we can transcend this entire material platform. And acting on the spiritual platform is practicing devotional service. So in this way, acting with knowledge is karma yoga. Acting with knowledge is better than renunciation, where there's always a risk of falling with renunciation because you're not attaching to anything higher through acting. That's what we're doing in this karma yoga. We're attaching to something higher through acting. If we're just renouncing, if we're just detaching from matter and we're not attaching to anything higher, then there's a risk of falling. Just like we talked about, if you have a kid and that automatically you have a kid, you're like, I don't care to go out and party on this Saturday night. But if you don't have that kid and you just stop cold turkey, it might be a little bit harder because you don't have a higher reason. It's just, and I'm not saying have a kid so that you can stop partying. That's not the message here. But the message is that it's much easier to detach from something lower when we have something higher. And it's a lot harder just to cold turkey detach from something lower just because we realize that it's not serving us. That's harder. Okay. So that's the principle here, that if we just renounce, then there's a risk of falling because we're not attaching to something higher. And in karma yoga, we're attaching to something higher through our actions. So we're acting in this world, but we're detaching from the result and we're giving that to God. So when we have affection for God, we'll be free from this bondage of the body. And the mind is no longer filled with the enjoy mentality. And therefore, we're free from material bondage. So one just kind of small point here, this is the last point of this text, and then maybe I could hear from some of you guys. But renouncing things that can be used in God's service is not renunciation. That's what we want to do here. And as bhakti yoga practitioners, is we want to use things in God's service. So it's not that we renounce the things, it's that whatever we have, we use in God's service. Like I have this computer. I'm not saying, okay, technology is so bad, I'm going to just stop, I'm just going to pull away from technology. I could, that's one way, because there are a lot of negative things about technology. Or could say, okay, this computer can be used to give classes, just like this, right? This computer can be used to do research for classes. We can use what we have in service to God. Okay, and that's what Krishna is trying to teach us here. We don't need to just completely pull away and say, I'm not even going to touch that because of, what it could do or where it could get me, because it can bring my consciousness down. No, I'm going to use it to connect with God. And in that way, I'm going to get out of this entire material existence and connect with God in the spiritual plane. And this is because nothing even belongs to us, right? Everything belongs to God. And if we have that mindset, if we can see things that way, then we can understand that everything should be used in the service of God. because everything belongs to God. The only thing for us to actually renounce is the illusion that we have anything to renounce, because nothing belongs to us. We think that this is my house. These are my plants. These are my kids. Everything belongs to God. This is my family. Everything belongs to God. So in that way, we need to use everything in the service of God. That's the rightful position. And when we try to use things in the service of ourselves, in the service of our senses, it just doesn't lead to the ultimate love of the heart, love and connection. We're just not totally getting it. But we have to understand that it's a process to get it. We can't just say, okay, I'm not going to do any of this because it's selfish. No, we have to regulate these things, and then we have to use part of our consciousness, part of our time in our day, right, to dedicate to connecting with God. And then in that way, gradually, that part of our consciousness that's connecting with God will get bigger, and the part of our consciousness that's getting happiness from these temporary material things will shrink. And that's a natural process, and it will happen over time. It takes time, but it's important that we are where we are, and we don't try to fake being somewhere that we're not, like prematurely renouncing, going off into the woods, or quitting our job, or whatever it is. We can't prematurely do that before we have the realization. And this is how we make steady spiritual advancement. We don't have to renounce action. We have to renounce the misconception that we're the enjoyers. Okay, I'll say that again. We don't have to renounce action. We have to renounce the misconception that we're the enjoyers. So renounce that misconception, and then start to align your life like that accordingly. Not by like black and white flipping off a switch. I'm not going to do anything that gives me any enjoyment. No, regulate, and then increase your activities and your God consciousness. So why karma yoga is better, he'll continue to explain in the next verses. Does anybody want to share anything? Oh, Kitty G. I'm sorry, I don't see your hands raised until the end. So
Sure.
I hope it hasn't been up for a while.
No, this is great. Thanks. Let's see. Yeah, sometimes I think when I'm, in a stuck in a bad mood, I think of Krishna like, hey, I'm trying to enjoy here, which is kind of a silly, nice little thing. And I was thinking about how I just in this past few minutes, how I feel kind of a new appreciation for being at this time in Kali Yuga, where there's a lot of, like quarrel and hypocrisy and drama and nonsense going on, because it seems like on our paths, like for me, in my experience, like Krishna provides so many wonderful people and relationships to lean into, and it's almost like I wouldn't trade it, like to be in a hard time, but what it brings with it is the amazing people we meet at such wonderful times, kind of perfectly. And that made me think about the Jnana yoga and the karma and bhakti yoga, and how like, let's see, I would struggle. Knowing my material self and my material mind, like my, that if I was trying to just go renounce and think about it, I would go insane. Like I would struggle so hard. And it was just making me feel really appreciative of like association and relationships with devotees, and all the steps of like all the options and parts of bhakti that we can latch onto and really embrace, but also bringing it back to that point of like, but that's in the service of our main thing of service of Krishna, using those things and recognizing what they are. And so thank you very much.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point. And there's a couple points there. It's beautiful because this age is very degraded. So the age of Kali, it's very degraded. But in whatever age we are, Krishna, God gives us a way to connect with him. And there is something beautiful about using whatever we're doing and trying to do it in God consciousness, trying to connect it to God some way. And in that way, the path of bhakti yoga is beautiful. It's joyful. It's fun. It's not overly complicated. It's not lonely. It's joyful. You know, whatever you're doing, whatever already, you know, wherever you're situated, whatever your natural inclination is, just dovetail that into the service of God, or, you know, do something to kind of develop God consciousness around that. And in that way, we're connecting, and we feel, those of us that have been practicing this for a little while, feel that transformation of the heart, feel how that makes us feel uplifted and joyful. And it's beautiful. That's the process. And we're not ready. We're not ready to renounce. I mean, that's also the point. Most of us are in a state of material consciousness that we can't just pull out completely. You know, we think that inactivity will be easy. We think that doing nothing will be easy, but it's actually quite hard because we all have so much passion in our bodies, right? It's not so easy to just do nothing. We may think that, but try doing that, you know, for a long time. You know, it might be nice for like a day to do nothing. Even then, usually we're doing something like watching TV or, you know,
The mind.
but yeah, the mind, we have a lot of passion in our bodies. We have to do something. It's the consciousness of most of us in this age. So that's the recommended process. Thank you, Katie. Trevor.
I wanted to speak a little on spiritualizing things or using things in service to Krishna too. And first, I want to remind everyone and you something brilliant you said about premature renunciation. It's like, or more so like in between, I guess it would be, because you're like, even if you can successfully renounce from this world and go live in the forest, for example, how good of an example would that be for humanity that doesn't quite understand that yet? You know, what good is it showing? Now you're not showing them a proper example by doing what's only good for you. But how about what's good for everyone? And that's what bhakti's about. It's more about putting the whole of society before you, as a byproduct of putting God before you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happens here is Arjuna doesn't even have that consciousness that he can just run away. He has too much passion in his body. So that is the recommended path. But to your point, God says, even if you have that consciousness, even if you're able to walk away from everything and do it in a way that you're connecting to God, don't work with the mood of detachment, work with internal renunciation to set an example, because most other people aren't at that high consciousness and will see you running away, and it will set that example. And then what to do, what will society do when everybody's just renouncing from their duties? I mean, we see what happens in our society when people are renouncing from their duties, right? It's just irresponsibility. It's not good. It's not good for society at large. So yeah, it's important, even if you're at that high consciousness, work to set an example.
I love that.
Yeah.
Very, very nice. And then talking about using things in service to God, it's why I love this book so much, because it helps you like open up a whole deeper dimension of your creativity, and helps like bring so much clarity to where so much confusion lies in the world. Like, oh, money's evil, too much material is evil, having a big house is wrong, or stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's this book, and Prabhupada's lectures, I love how he explained with the example of his tape recorder. He's like, this tape recorder was material until I got it, and then I started using it to speak about Krishna, and now it's spiritualized. And they relate it in the scriptures to bhakti being like a fire, and you yourself, by being engaged to bhakti and giving love to God, is heating. You're like an iron rod, and you're heating that rod up until it becomes one with the fire and has the same properties. So the same thing as with your materials that you're using in the service, they're like iron you're putting in the fire that are becoming the fire itself. So like the house you use is no longer just a shelter for your uh, material luxurious comfort. It's more like a space that you're able to promote consciousness and invoke Krishna inside of. Um, and then you used your computer as an example. Very good. Same thing. Uh, our phones right now are in bhakti. How we use our money, where we are investing, how we our demeanor at work. Everything's becoming spiritualized. This book helped me to see how to properly do that. And Prabhupada, Jai Shri Prabhupada, he really cleared up a lot of confusion, because I see where a lot of people are having trouble like understanding, and there's a lot of people that will prematurely renounce and leave all their stuff behind and live out of bags and stuff, and it doesn't last very long. And I'm glad I read these scriptures, because it does get confusing when you look at all these different approaches, and you realize like with Christian conscious you're able to see like where it all comes into play and whatnot, and where people might be hitting a wall, and where they'd be able to advance, and you yourself especially, and knowing yourself as to not be the proprietor helps you to gain that natural renunciation. And it's like, I don't even own my body. I can't even say this is my body. Like you said, my son, my daughter, my this and that. That's all just role playing, temporary role playing. They could have been our dad in our last life or whatever, you know what I mean? So it's all just a temporary situation that's being granted to us by the actual proprietor. So even when we who are inside of our bodies has to switch up or go to another world, so to say, even we have to give these rental cars back.
Right. Yeah. So I want to move on. I want to do this one last verse, and then we'll see if we have a little more time for reflections. Thank you, Trevor. And this last verse, text 3, this will be our last verse for the day. It says, "One who neither hates nor desires the fruits of his activities is known to be always renounced. Such a person, free from all dualities, easily overcomes material bondage and is completely liberated. O mighty armed Arjuna." So we are continuing this theme that we're talking about here. Renunciation in action is that we act, but we don't have desires or aversions, because our consciousness is so connected to God that we're acting in that consciousness. That's like the gold standard of this. Now there's various degrees, but we can practice this even if we're not fully there, but we're trying. Okay, that's kind of where we're trying to aspire for. And when we reach that state, when we can get there, when we can act in this world, but we're renounced from the results, okay, we're detached from the results, we can stay free from duality. So it's not like this is good, this is bad, this is hot, this is cold. It's like whatever we're doing for the service of God. And in that, the material products, whatever results from that, we're unaffected by, because we just aren't so engaged materially. And this happens internally when one isn't attached to things in this material world. And this detachment happens when we have knowledge of the soul. That's what he's saying here. When we have knowledge of the soul, this is what happens. And later he's going to say it happens when we're attached to God and we want to serve God. That's the highest. That's bhakti. And when we know our constitutional position as part and parcel, therefore we have nothing to aspire or lament over. And there's no duality, because whatever he does for God. And being free from duality, that person is liberated even in this world. And that's the point here, and that's the process. And there's different degrees, and that's the beautiful thing about the Gita. There's different paths that you can take depending where you are, and there's different degrees. You can do it out of like this loving relationship with Krishna, and that's the highest. Or even if you're doing it out of just knowledge of the soul, that you can also make progress. It's not quite the highest, but you can also make progress in that way. If you're not quite ready for a loving relationship with God, just knowing that by nature, you're actually the soul, you're not this body, that knowledge can rise can rise your consciousness. So we're used to acting in this world with so much attachment to the result. Okay? We have so many expectations and pressures put on us. We want to be appreciated, accepted, acknowledged in a positive light, and we strive to make others proud of us. This is really most of our material existence as we're bumping around. Krishna is teaching us that the key to acting is acting with detachment. So we have to understand, even in this material plane, that we can't even determine the results of our work. Like we don't even have so much control over the results of our work, even as we're moving around. Like when you get off this call, you go through, do your day, so many things are going to come up that you didn't expect, that you didn't try to make happen, or the opposite. Things happen that was not what you wanted. So there's so many influences outside of our control that getting so focused, on controlling the result, it's really just leads us to like anxiety and stress, right? Because even if we do our best, things don't always go as we want. And this is deflating, right? This can be deflating, but it's not deflating. It's actually liberating. Okay, so on one hand, we may be like, wow, that's not the way I wanted this to go at all. But if we understand the broader picture, that this is God's arrangement, right? And we actually don't have so much control over the result. All we have control over is doing our best. And therefore, that should be our metric for success. If we could change this narrative, that's actually liberating, because it kind of relieves all the pressure of like, oh, things need to happen like this. If they don't, it's good. If they don't, it's bad. If they do, it's good. I have to make this happen. No, that's not even our metric for success, because we understand that we're not the controllers and so many things are out of control. Our metric for success is, did I do my best? Did I show up with a full heart, with a pure intention? That's our metric for success. And that's what Krishna's trying to get us to change here. Because understanding, even in the broad picture scheme of things, that we don't have control over the result. It's just not in our control. So if there is some success, if things do go according to the way that we wanted, maybe we feel some gratitude, right? And if there's some struggle and they don't go the way that we wanted, we can still remain determined and hopeful, knowing that there's a higher plan for us in place. We have to trust that higher plan. If things don't go the way we want, we accept, okay, that was the way that God wanted them to go for whatever reason, and I'm going to stay in the game. And I'm going to continue to show up with a full heart and pure intention and trust God's plan for me. If we don't have this vision of spiritual dependency, successes will make us proud and struggles will make us lose our esteem. Right? They'll make us lose our self-esteem and we'll get hopeless. Maybe we'll feel useless or inadequate. And that's the trap that we don't want to walk into. So we really have to work on this changing our perspective, that everything that's happening to us is happening to us for a reason. Right? We're not the controllers. We don't know best. All we can do is show up with a full heart and pure intention. And that's our service to God. It's not related to the outcome, because that part is not totally in our control. And there's this book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You guys read this book? By Stephen Covey. He talks about this. He talks about the difference between our circle of concern and our circle of influence. Okay, so our circle of concern is think of it like it's like a small circle, and that the circle of concern is like the big circle. Big circle. This includes everything that we're concerned about. Okay, our health, our family, our finances, the economy, politics, all of it. Okay, inside the circle of concern is a smaller circle of influence, and this is the things that we can actually control. Okay, who we choose to be friends with, who we choose as a partner. Maybe this is arranged, but let's just say that. Where we work, what we learn. Okay, this circle is a smaller circle that's inside the circle of influence. Okay, and Stephen Covey says that frustration occurs in between the two circles. Okay, so that space between what you can actually control and what you're actually concerned about, frustration occurs. But Stephen Covey also says that whatever circle we focus on will expand. So if we focus on the things that we can influence, the things that we can control, then it will expand, therefore making the distance between the circle of influence and the circle of concern smaller, thereby reducing our frustration. So his point here is that it's not even productive to focus so much on things that we can't control. And we have to work to understand the difference. What's that Christian proverb? Or is it a Christian? I know they use it in AA, the Serenity Prayer. Understand the things that I can control, things that I can't, the wisdom to know the difference, something along that line. So that's the point here, is that the more that we focus on just the things that we can control and let go of the things that we can't, and kind of use that, lean into our dependence on God to kind of take care of that for us, the less frustration that we'll experience in this life. Okay, so it's interesting how even, these psychological things and, the things that we do for success, they really align with this spiritual framework, with this spiritual mindset. And I thought that was a really nice depiction how Stephen Covey, even this person who's talking about 7 habits of highly effective people is like, look, you can't control everything and you got to get over it or you're going to be frustrated. And Krishna tells us the same thing. Right? And just like Trevor was saying, activity is natural for us. Giving it up is unnatural. It's natural. It's easier to do activity and stay free from bondage rather than to just try to stop doing activity completely and seek freedom from bondage. It's easier to act. Externally, it may seem like it's easier just to do nothing, but it's very difficult, again, because we have so much passion in the body. So this is, again, why Krishna tells us to act. He sees where Arjuna is. He sees where we are. He says, act, but dovetail it into my service, or dovetail it into God consciousness. Even if when you get off this call, if you're going to cook, turn on something that is turn on some spiritual music or a lecture, something that uplifts you. You'll find that if you get into this consciousness, you can do it in more ways than you even think of. If this is really your priority as you're going about your day, there's more opportunities than you even really know to plug into source. And that's what the message here is, to plug into source, whatever you're doing. Maybe you're doing it in service, maybe it's the way you show up, like Trevor said, maybe it's the way you show up. Maybe it's, again, while you're doing something else, while you're driving your car, what are you listening to? When you have that 15-minute break at work, what are you doing in that break? We try to find whatever we're doing, plugging it in, and we'll realize that we can make our entire life an offering in this way. And that's what we're learning here. Devi Radhika put on the board here, the Serenity Prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Yeah, that is the same from the 12-step program. Great. Yeah, thank you. Does anybody want to share anything before we end?
Yeah,
Maybe
I know we're a little.
Yeah.
I know we're a little over time, so I'll try and make it quick. But man, this class was so good, and I love how you talked about, we're not all going to be at that level where we're ready to even renounce that validation. We touched on that in the group this last weekend, and that is so beautiful. It's like finding that balance of those loving relationships that nourish us and do validate us along the path. So then we do realize eventually we don't need it as much, but if we're starved of it, then we're going to be hankering for it in all of the wrong areas, right? And so it's so important and that's why I think this path is so beautiful, because, in Bhakti, in Krishna conscious culture, we're taught to offer respects to everybody, right? And if you're offering respects, you are validating each other, and that's uplifting everybody. And so you're not going to feel that hankering to try and find it outside of, the community or the culture, if the community and the culture is healthy. And, I grew up at a time when ISKCON wasn't so healthy, unfortunately, and we didn't have that. And so, and I think there was just such this strict idea of detachment and relationship was like wrong almost. And it made me be more like, I wouldn't say I was a Jnani Yogi, but like I avoided relationships. I avoided friendships. I avoided people. I avoided everything. And I would contemplate about God a lot when I was a kid. But because I had no association, it was so incredibly lonely and it was so incredibly like isolative that I just went and hung out with other groups, other friends, and I got into like really, terrible things. I mean, not terrible, but you did whatever everyone else did. And you can see when the bhakti culture and the community is actually healthy and it's validating, you know, I have no desire to go anywhere else. Like you get so fulfilled and you can actually do your duty and you can actually, focus on God. And it's like a whole upliftment. And that's what Prabhupada came to establish, was this house for everybody, right? And so it's so beautiful, and it's so beautiful to come back into this group and to have all those misconceptions cleared and to actually feel that loving relationships in the community. And it's been transformative for me. So I just wanted to share that and how I recognize that in my own life and learning to come back and find that balance. And yeah, so thank you.
Wow. Mariah, you have such beautiful shares. Thank you for sharing your realizations. And I love what you said about the culture too, that there is a reason, we need culture. We need this. I remember the first time I went to a Sangha in Pittsburgh, the host gave me all these gifts, all like these clothes, just like all these things. The host, that she later became one of my best friends. But it's just like when we support each other, when we show love to each other, it does uplift us. And this is so important in our spiritual lives because we do have needs. I mean, we can't act like we don't. And to have a culture, a community that has that it's uplifting. It helps us in our journey. It really does. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we can't avoid relationships by being afraid of becoming too attached, right? We have to still act loving and caring in our relationships. And actually, that leads to a detachment eventually because we'll feel fulfilled.
Yeah.
If we avoid relationships because we're afraid of becoming attached, then we're falsely renouncing and detaching, and we're actually creating a harder attachment because it creates that hankering.
Right.
I see that in my father, actually, how when he calls, he kind of just went off on his own, and I can see when he calls us, he's sad and he misses us, and so he has more of a hankering than if he could have just learned to work through some of his emotional baggage and be present with us and experience that life with us. He wouldn't hanker and miss us so much. So that missing and that hankering, it creates more of an attachment, actually.
Yeah.
At least I see that to some degree, but some
Yeah.
people maybe could do it, but it's not for everybody.
We have to know where we are. That's so important.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's beautiful. So nice. Kalpana, do you want to share any last reflections before we go here? You're on mute, my friend. You're on mute, my friend. Still on mute. I'm going to ask you to unmute. Okay, maybe you can't.
Yes.
Oh, there you
I
go.
just kept listening and listening to Mariah, and it was so nice to hear. And she's right that if we do it like, okay, I don't want to be attached, and just renounce, that is not going to work. You have to have those feelings, and then slowly and gradually you renounce. That is a very good point.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, my friends. Well, that is our Sangha for today. We will meet on Monday. Thank you all for coming and participating.
Haribol.
Haribo.